So they're basically telling you they're trading upwards ends of 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day, every day. That's 3.5 times annual global mine supply, of which 95% of those trades are paper promises. What's happening right now, for the first time in my career, is that you have countries like India and China who are now motivated, sophisticated, coordinated, wealthy, and cunning. And they are draining the exchanges using our stupidity.
All right, so today on the pod, we have Andy Schectman, president and owner of Miles Franklin Precious Metal Investments. And he's been in the industry now for about 3 decades, has sold 34 years. He's sold billions of dollars worth of the precious metals, has very large clients in that world. And the long and short story on Andy, from my point of view, is he's a true student of the game. His commentary on geopolitics, monetary policy is something that I've thoroughly enjoyed over the years, and more importantly, learned a lot from. So it's a pleasure to have him on the podcast today. Andy, welcome.
Great to be here, brother. Thank you for such a kind, warm welcome. I appreciate it. Humbled.
So just to kind of kick things off, before we jump into some of the more a little more complex issues on the world of gold and silver and the geopolitics involved, there's something that I want to touch on. You've proudly stated in the past that, precious metals are wealth, not an investment. I think gold has returned, compounded annual rate of about 9% over the last 20 years. To me, and as I've treated it, and I think a lot of our audience has, it is an investment, but you say it's wealth. What do you mean by that?
When I started my company with my father, I was 19 years old. And we started very humble beginnings. My dad's middle name is Miles, his friend who lent us $60,000 in 1989. Think about that. Before the internet, to start a precious metals company, the most unlikely cast of characters to ever succeed. Somehow we did. We've done over 10 billion in sales 34 years later, but at the time it was a leap of faith. And my parents come from nothing. They sold their life insurance policies and borrowed $60,000 from a friend since grade school to start a company, using a word processor to type out a newsletter, hard copy, sending out once a quarter by mail, putting labels and stamps on it. That's how far we've come. But my dad said to me day one that I will not let you make the same mistakes that I made as a younger man. And I will impose one rule and only one rule, or I will fire you. And that is, you'll buy gold or silver every 2 weeks you get paid, period. I don't care if it's 1 ounce of silver, you'll buy something. That's the only rule. Oh, okay, I can deal with that, Dad. Well, I've owned the company outright for a very long time, over 2 decades. He's still alive. I talk to him every day. In many ways, he's still my partner. But he won't fire me anymore if I don't honor that promise, Aaron, but I have. And it's the best gift I've ever been given in my life, the gift of learning the power of compounding and the power of paying yourself first. But when I look at my gold, I know it is appreciated by 9.9% compounding since 2000. That outpaces everything traditional. But I don't look at it as an investment, even though it very much performed as one. To me, it is wealth. You go back to, biblical times where it's mentioned, 500-600 times in the Bible, and everything forward, kings, queens, emperors, pharaohs, none of them called their gold broker to make an investment. They owned gold as a form of immutable wealth that had been agreed upon by all of human civilization since the beginning of time, that it is indeed wealth. Now, I would say the same thing about silver, but at the same time, I would say to you that fundamentally silver is the best investment I've ever seen in 34 and a half years of finance. And if you base your logic upon what makes a good investment, well, let's first talk about supply demand. The Silver Institute will tell us that there is going to be about a 240 or 50 million ounce shortfall between supply and demand this year. This is the 4th year in a row, I believe. It is now a structural imbalance. Greater demand than there is supply. That's number one. If you went back and dug a hole 5,000 years ago, you would see a 16-to-1 geologic ratio between silver to gold, meaning 16 ounces of silver would come out of that hole for every 1 ounce of gold. And it was that way all through human history for thousands of years. Even when Sir Isaac Newton was trying to figure out how much gold and silver should he use to figure out the relationship in the currency, he chose a 16-to-1 ratio. That is, let's call that God's ratio. That's the geologic ratio. And it had been that way forever. And we get to the Industrial Revolution, largely because of logistics, where you can have $1 million worth of gold in a backpack and run. $1 million worth of silver is going to weigh, 2,000 pounds or whatever. And so gold's role as money, gold's role in logistics, and silver's role as an industrial application for many applications, anything that conducts electricity, basically. That ratio had been skewed to about 42-to-1. Right? That's man's ratio. The price is 42-to-1, but the mining ratio, the geologic ratio, always stood at 16-to-1. So that made silver a good value just because of that imbalance. Well, let's fast forward to where we are right now. And we take the price of gold today of $2,515 and the price of silver, call it $28.50. The ratio, God, is that right? Is 98. That can't be right. Is that right? 25.15 divided by 28.5. 88.2. That's more like it. Yeah. At an 88.2-to-1 ratio, you are talking roughly 0.5% of the time over the last 5,000 years we've been in this high ratio, which is manipulated to all hell. In every sense of the word, this is an anomaly, and it becomes more of an anomaly when you realize that guys like Keith Neumeyer, my buddy who was the CEO of First Majestic Silver, one of the biggest mining companies in the world, will tell you and tell me and tell publicly that ratio geologically, God's ratio, is now 7-to-1. It's coming out of the ground at a ratio of 7 ounces of silver to every 1 ounce of gold. And that's because, like your skin is epidermis, silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal, right near the surface. Big deposits were found a long time ago. So he's saying it's coming out of the ground at 7-to-1 because it's depleting in nature. And the price ratio says 88-to-1. It's averaged 16-to-1 for 5,000 years. And the price ratio, divide gold into silver, really since the Industrial Revolution has been about 42 to 45-to-1 on average for almost 200 years. In every respect of the word, we are in rarefied air. And when I look at the things that over 35 years that I've done that have proven to be uber successful, they've always centered around identification and exploitation of price anomalies, whether it be the Swiss franc and gold, whether it be gold and silver, whether it be numismatics and bullion, whatever it is. When you see an anomaly, it's there for a reason. I'm a big baseball fan. I got all these baseball cards on my wall up there that I built through years of telling people, if you own baseball cards, send them in. I'll sell you gold for them, and became a power seller on eBay, and have all the old cards from the early 1900s, the Babe Ruths and the Ty Cobbs and the Mickey Mantles, all those cards. But using baseball as an analogy, the law of averages is real. There's been one baseball player in the modern era, Ted Williams, who batted 400, did so on the last day of the season, the last day. And he could have sat out. He was right at 400 the last day, and he said, I'll play. And he went 2 for 3, and he ended at 400, just over 400. One guy, because the law of averages is real. So if your favorite baseball player starts out the season, a guy who gets 600 at-bats a year, and he's batting 700 in April, I'll bet you any amount of money that you want that he will not finish at 400 or higher. Because there's been one out of all the thousands and thousands and thousands of major leaguers over the last 75 years that did it. This is an anomaly. It's an outlier. And that's where we are with silver right now. And it becomes even more, I think, ridiculous when you realize a massive omission that's happening with silver right now from the Silver Institute. There's a Senate subcommittee, S.2768, a Senate subcommittee hearing S.2768, October 14th, 1942. I'll give credit to John Little of the Pickaxe for turning me on to this. And I'll read to you just the first paragraph of this Senate subcommittee meeting in 1942. It says the present consumption of silver for war purposes is at the rate of about 100 million ounces a year and is growing rapidly. According to the War Production Board, it is only a matter of months before war demands will have increased sufficiently to require at least 200 million ounces of silver per year. That's 1942. So I'm giving speeches in Vancouver 2 years ago where I say there's 500 ounces of silver in the Tomahawk cruise missile. And this guy comes up to me and says, I work for the DOD. I developed the Tomahawk. I know there's a little bit of silver in it, but that would surprise me. So he's like, I'll get back to you. Never heard from him again. I go back up this year, to Jay Martin's conference, which is the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, one of only two I go to. The guy's there again. He's got pictures, and he's showing me, listen, he says, it's all declassified. He's like, yeah, he said, here are some pictures where we were trying to have it shoot up vertically. It was designed to come out of a torpedo tube. Oh, by the way, you were right, he said. There's between 13 and 14 kilograms in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Works for the DOD. All right, so now, 1942, there's a Senate subcommittee meeting saying 200 million ounces a year is needed. This guy tells me there's 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. Confirms it. You go look at the Silver Institute numbers, military is just somehow not in there. They don't mention the uses of military in the supply-demand imbalance, of which we're 230 or 40 million ounces short. Now, here's the interesting thing. There are 8 banks right now, 8 Western banks, commercial banks, that hold the largest concentrated short position of any commodity ever traded in the history of the COMEX market, ever, in silver. This little tiny itty bitty market, you have 8 of the most powerful Western banks in the world stepping on it so that it will not go up.
There's been traders who have been convicted, I believe, of manipulating the silver market in the past. I can't remember which
head
banks.
trader of J.P. Morgan, Michael Nowak, and a couple others, and yet they're still allowed to be the custodian of the world's largest silver trust, SLV.
So why are they doing it? That's what I can't narrow down. Why?
Because the military-industrial complex is, who the hell do you think's running this country right now? Who's selling all of the armaments around the world? Who's funding the wars? Who's making these decisions? Who's way up there? Where do all of these former bank execs and employees go to? If not J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs, they go to the military-industrial complex like Raytheon and whatnot, and the big string pullers. Why would they not list silver in the supply-demand fundamentals? Why are we told that? And if you Google, now it's out there that there's 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk. Why is it not in the supply-demand numbers? And I think one way that this can really be, where you can take empirical evidence and say, yeah, well, wow, it is exactly what you just brought up. And, my friend Chris Marcus did an interview with Bart Chilton, and I would implore everyone to watch it. Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics, just Google Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics, and Bart Chilton, Chilton. Bart Chilton was the head of the CFTC, the Commodity Police, basically. And he came on Chris's show, and he said the following. I'm going to paraphrase it. He said, Bear Stearns went bankrupt, and they held the largest short position in silver that the commodity exchange had ever seen. And at the time, it was Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke. Ben was the head of the Fed, and
Paulson the
Treasury Secretary,
right.
and they called in Jamie into his office. This is being told to Chris on this podcast. You can watch it for yourself. And Bart says, we said to Jamie, listen, Jamie, Bear Stearns just went bankrupt. They have this massive short in silver. We need you to take it. Okay, fellas, I'll take it, but I will be in violation of position limits. That's okay, Jamie. We'll give you a period of time to pare them down so that you can get into the proper position limits so you're not violating, you're not doing anything illegal. Okay, great, cool. So off he goes. He agrees to take it, and some time goes by, and Bart Chilton takes a look at things, and he's like, he runs into his superiors, and he says, listen, we're at the end of the time frame we gave them, and in fact, they haven't pared it down. They've in fact increased it. They are in violation of our agreement. They're in violation of antitrust law. They need to be prosecuted. And he was told, back down, Bart. It's a political decision. Back down, Bart. it's a political decision. Bart died a week later. Now, I'm not saying it was coincidental.
Right.
Maybe it just was natural. But what I am saying is that the head of the CFTC admitted that what was happening was that they were allowing this bank to not only not pare down their short position, but in fact increase it. And he was told to back down. And it's the only time I've ever heard anyone in that position say something like that. Now let's go back. Why would they do it? Because the need for silver is so extreme in making high-tech weaponry and aerospace, like the stealth bomber. If there's 500 ounces needed in a Tomahawk cruise missile, how about the 260 billion we've given in weapons to the Ukraine? And all of that is high-tech weaponry that needs copious amounts of silver. Ask yourself this question. On the LBMA, the London Bullion Metals Exchange, they admit to having right now about 800 million ounces of silver, of which 500 million belong to the ETF. So they say we have 300 million. They also say that's the lowest position they've had since they started keeping records because it's being drained. We see massive, massive deliveries. In fact, just to highlight that one point, since 2020, when stand for deliveries became a common occurrence, and before that, no one stood for delivery. I started doing podcasts in 2020, a lot of it with Liberty and Finance screaming, they're draining the exchanges. I've never seen this before. No one ever stood for delivery. Well, now, since 2020, 2,136 tons of gold have stood for delivery and 24,072 tons of silver have stood for delivery. Well, that's just off the COMEX, and it goes to say these are staggering figures, but do not include exchanges for physical, which is a significant but unknown portion where swap for London forward contracts and then delivery taken, where you can buy a contract in the West and stand for delivery in London. We're also seeing stand for delivery in China because there is a little known contract that was developed in 2015 where there is a BRICS facility in Hong Kong where you can buy contract in the West and deliver it privately to this exchange in Hong Kong where it's then trucked over to the Shanghai Gold Exchange and sold. But that's for another discussion. But let me just simply say this. The LBMA will tell you that they have, in essence, 300 million ounces of silver that are not owned by the ETFs. They will also tell you that they will admit to trading 292 million ounces of that silver per day, every day, right? But they also will tell you that those numbers of 292 million ounces a day, basically the entire stash is traded every day. How the hell does that work? But then they go on to say, oh, but by the way, we're only posting the final settlement numbers, so the trades themselves are 10 times that number. So they're basically telling you they're trading upwards ends of 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day, every day. That's 3.5 times annual global mine supply, of which 95% of those trades are paper promises. In other words, they overwhelm the system with paper, the commercial banks who have unlimited money, backed by the Western central banks who want to be able to produce and create high-tech weapons. And if you don't have cheap silver, you can't do that. And what's happening right now, for the first time in my career, is that you have countries like India and China who are now motivated, sophisticated, coordinated, wealthy, and cunning. And they are draining the exchanges using our stupidity, where you can see a $920 million fine by the Justice Department to JP Morgan for manipulating the silver market, the largest fine they've ever handed out, ever. And yet their head trader, Michael Nowak, who I've met before, is in prison right now for doing this. And yet they're still allowed to be the custodian of the world's largest silver trust, along with BlackRock. And JP Morgan is also part custodian of GLD. So you have the foxes guarding the henhouse. But why would COMEX be able to do 1,500, 1,600% rehypothecation in their silver contracts, meaning me, you, and 14 other people all own a contract. We think we can take delivery, but it happens to be on the same bars. If all of us try at the same time, it's what happened to Bernie Madoff. He ran a good shop until everyone said, give me my money. And then it was realized it was a Ponzi scheme. But that's what the Western markets are. And for the first time, these countries are now coordinated, sophisticated, and motivated and wealthy enough to stand for delivery. They are beating us at our own game, like jiu-jitsu, where you use your opponent's leverage against
momentum.
them. They are using our leverage against us. So this will end poorly. How many people know China? A lot of people know they're the largest producer of gold in the world. How many people know they're the second largest producer of silver in the world?
Yeah, right behind
they're
Mexico.
all around Latin America, buying all the silver concentrate and the silver doré, which is unrefined silver that comes directly from the miners. And instead of waiting till that silver is refined and is then traded on an exchange like the LBMA or the COMEX, they're buying it in unrefined form, paying double what the West will pay all throughout Latin America, shipping it home to China and refining it there. Therefore, it didn't come off of an exchange. It doesn't affect the price, and no one has any idea how much silver they are really accumulating. So when you see India import almost 800 million ounces of silver in the last 3 years, and China now becoming a net importer instead of a net exporter and buying up all the unrefined silver they can find, draining the exchanges, this is one of these deals that will wake up on a Monday morning one day and be, oh my God, what is that right? Could it really be that high? So yes, silver still to me is wealth, but I will tell you in all of my career, I've never seen a better investment than what silver has in every metric: supply, demand, plurality in demand, military, green, digital, electric, electronic,
Right.
investing. There are very few things that check all the boxes quite the way that silver does. So yeah.
Right. And
I
you're
mean-
not. So we had Dr. Kirk on, who's also a bullion dealer, and his thesis was the same as yours. He's more bullish on silver than gold. But let me, Dr. Kirk Elliott. He's based out of Colorado.
Yeah.
So his thesis was very similar to yours as well. Let me just I just want to make sure I understand the kind of what's going on in the silver market. So, and I want to make sure I summarize it correctly here. So essentially, the U.S. wants to keep prices low because
the U.S. and the Western allies. The G7.
So the West, the G7 wants to keep silver's price in check because of the military applications. They don't want it to get too excessive. Now, having said that, the East, or countries like China, India, I would imagine maybe even Russia, who knows, they look at that as like, okay, you want to do that? We'll go buy the physical because the price is artificially cheap. We'll just keep buying the physical, bring it back to our lands, and this will backfire on the West. Is that essentially it?
100%. And I'm going to give you two anecdotal statements that will back that up. One was made by the head of the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which, by the way, over the last 150 days, the Shanghai Gold Exchange cumulative volume between it and the Shanghai Metals Exchange and the Futures Exchange has increased over 200%, and that volume is now greater than the COMEX. It's now the second most traded exchange on the planet. It's beginning to have severe significance. But he said in 2015, when China is allowed to speak at the table, the real price of gold will be observed. And the BRICS countries just built something called the BRICS Grain Exchange. And the guy that's running it, he said, we produce more of the wheat and the soft commodities than the West does, and we consume more of it, yet we don't have any ability to affect its price. That's all done on COMEX. But with the establishment of this new grain exchange, that will change. They know what we're doing with metals, and they're using it against us. That's exactly right. The reason they're not bitching yet is because they're using the brain-dead Western suppression to drain the exchanges. That's exactly what they're doing. And then when there's no more companies or entities willing to sell at these prices, I believe that the legitimate price setting will move eastward to places like Shanghai, to places like Dubai and even Moscow, where these are the countries that appreciate, accumulate, stockpile, and understand metals better than the West does.
So over the last couple decades, but more specifically, I'd say the last few years since the Ukraine conflict kicked off, the global monetary system, or let's call it the global wealth strategies of some of these sovereign nations, especially in the East, as we've been talking about, has completely kind of been flipped on its head. Many of these once reliable buyers of U.S. Treasuries are doing a 180, and they're dumping Treasuries now in exchange for commodities, and I would assume largely gold as well, and probably silver. Why is this happening specifically? There's obviously massive implications on the U.S. economy at some point, but also pretty significant implications for self-directed individual investors and how we kind of formulate our own strategies for our long-term portfolio. So why is this happening? Why are big reliable buyers of treasuries now saying, you know what, screw it, sell the treasuries, buy the commodities. What was the trigger behind that, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Bozar, a very smart man, said we are now in Bretton Woods 3. Bretton Woods 1, when the dollar was backed by gold after World War II till 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window. Bretton Woods 2, when the dollar was tied to specifically and exclusively to oil purchases and oil sales through OPEC, which just ended about a month and a half ago when Saudi Arabia didn't cancel it, but said we're not going to be exclusive to the dollars. We're going to take other currencies too. Or Bretton Woods 3, this is all about commodities. But why are they choosing those commodities? Think about it from a historical perspective. We're a country that is broke. We have, a mountain of debt, 35 trillion. Trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. And when you think how big a trillion is, 31,688 years ago is a trillion seconds. We're at 35 trillion in debt. Our unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions are approaching 200 trillion. We'll never pay it back, ever. 77 trillion in Social Security, 99 trillion in Medicare Part B, 22 trillion in Medicare Part D. Just those three alone are 180 trillion in unfunded liabilities. You look at the U.S. government's balance sheet. Google what is the asset base, or what are the largest assets of the U.S. government? It's $5 trillion. The largest asset of the U.S. government is student debt of $1.6 trillion. That's it. Now the country has more money, but the U.S. government has $5 trillion in assets with up to $200 trillion in liabilities. We're broke, we're insolvent, but more to your point, we are viewed by most of the world as being wholly hypocritical. And we can say to Janet Yellen, can say to CNN, we're okay with Xi and Putin being friends in BRICS. Thank you, Madam Secretary, that's great. But if Xi gives one penny to Putin or his war machine, we will sanction China's banks, their companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the over 160 trillion, or 260 billion rather, that we've given to the Ukraine, much in the way of weapons, the Stinger missiles, the F-16 jets, the intelligence on where to shoot it, training Ukrainian pilots in the Arizona desert, all of this stuff. That doesn't matter because we're the world reserve currency. And then what did they do? Then they confiscated, which is the same thing as stealing, which is the same thing as defaulting, on $5 trillion in Russian treasuries here in the U.S., and used them to give, mostly in the form of weapons, think silver again, military-industrial complex, to the Ukraine, the country they're in a war against. So as the world reserve currency, it is not our prerogative to go around the world sanctioning everyone, where the West right now is sanctioning 60% of all the underdeveloped countries. We went to Iraq 21 years ago, under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. We're sorry we didn't find them. We destroyed your country, toppled your regime, and guess what? We're still here, sanctioning 14 of your banks for trying to buy liquid natural gas funneled through Iranian banks. And they made $90 billion in oil revenue last year. That's all held at the New York Fed. They can't even control their own natural resource revenue 20 years after supposedly installing a new regime and doing it the right way, looking for those weapons of mass destruction, saving the world. We didn't find any of it. And here we are. They asked us for $1 billion at the end of 23. We said, no, sorry, we're busy. It's your money. Come back. We'll give it to you next year. So what have they done? They've made trading in dollars illegal. If you do so and own a business, you'll end up in jail. They've gotten rid of all green bills as of January 1. There are none in Iraq, none in any bank. They've officially applied to BRICS, and they're kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. They look at us as being wholly hypocritical. So we can go around the world imposing sanctions using our treasuries as weapon. No, these are ours now because we don't like the way you play. Doesn't matter how we play. We're the world reserve currency. Our you-know-what doesn't stink, but we can tell you what to do. So the rest of the world says, well, let's see. Gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury, doubled it for 25 years with no counterparty risk. And so what they are slowly doing, and on top of selling dollars and repositioning, which is called de-dollarizing, this isn't a word, but you'll get my point. They are de-treasurizing also. They are slowly, instead of dumping treasuries, which causes too much attention, they used to roll them over. Every time they would expire, they would just roll it over and buy a new one, finance our exorbitant lifestyle, finance our debt-binging society. Now they're not. Instead of them not rolling them over, They're buying commodities, like Zoltan Pozar says, he or she who has the commodities in Bretton Woods 3 wins. They're buying gold because it's doubled its performance. It has no counterparty liability. It can't be stolen. And if we look at the new BRICS ecosystem, the unit settlement token, which has been agreed upon in principle, according to the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, Dilma Rousseff, who was the former president of Brazil,
Yeah.
you end up with a new system that needs gold. And if they enact a system where all of a sudden it is a common settlement currency backed by gold in a basket of BRICS plus currencies, the need to hold dollars, gone. The need to hold treasuries, gone. And like that, the whole thing snaps. Now, you could argue, I always, people give me a hard time because I say little by little by little, then all at once. This logarithmic decay, I always say, but this is what's happening. Little by little, the world is de-dollarizing and selling treasuries, not too fast to cut off their nose to spite their face. Little by little, they're draining the exchanges of all of the world's commodities, not just gold and silver. China just bought the London Metals Exchange. That's the biggest exchange in the world for base metals. They're going all around the world in their Belt Road and striking deals in BRICS with all these underdeveloped countries that are resource rich, and they're doing it cooperatively instead of coercively. Even the name of their Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional military organization in the world, which Iran and Saudi Arabia just joined. All of these things are little by little by little chipping away at the dollar hegemony, which is gone. It's the supremacy that's not gone yet, but that's next.
Right.
And when these countries, if indeed all of the oil-producing countries agree to the new BRICS settlement currency called the unit, it will change the landscape of this country forever. And when you bring it all the way back home, the craziest part about it all is that our lead economic advisor to the United States government right now is a man named Jared Bernstein. Many of you probably saw his stupidity trying to explain bond sales and money creation and on Twitter a few months ago.
Oh, I think I did. Yeah.
The guy couldn't even speak. This is a guy who has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work. A master's degree in social work. He is an inclusionary economist, a modern monetary theorist knucklehead who says we shouldn't have the world reserve currency. He has written a report called Dethroning King Dollar where he advocates for this. So if you think about it, what better way to lose the reserve currency than to weaponize the dollar, to tell Saudi Arabia, hey, we're going green. Thanks anyway. It's been great run. We're going green. We're not going to really need fossil fuels anymore. And then let the country go to shit. All of the things that made this country great, all of a sudden people are like, is this bizarro world we're living in? Or is it too stupid to be stupid? Could all of this be planned so that the world dumps dollars and that we reset the system? And instead of blaming the Fed and the fiscal irresponsibility of the Treasury Department for destroying the American dream, we can blame Xi Jinping, Putin, and OPEC for dumping the dollar. After all, we incentivize the hell out of them to do it. But the public, well, they don't know that. The media doesn't report any of this. You got to dig, and read every day like I do, even to come close to finding this stuff out. And if you don't, you'll just think that we are victims to this awful thing that destroyed the reserve currency. The whole thing resets as every country in the world who's had to stockpile dollars and treasuries has no need to do that anymore, dumps them, which results in hyperinflation as all of those dollars and treasuries hit our shore. The byproduct of which is not Jerome Powell raising interest rates to 5%, it's interest rates going to 30% to compensate for the hyperinflation. And when that happens, everything that makes people feel rich is dead. Stocks, bonds, real estate, the over-leveraged, undercapitalized banks, the over-leveraged, undercapitalized insurance companies. But have no fear, because number two is here, and that's Lael Brainerd. And if Kamala wins, she will be the head of the Federal Reserve. She was number two underneath Powell recently before she transitioned to number two economic advisor for the Biden White House. But while she was at the Fed, she worked with MIT in development of the new CBDC. She ran point on Fed Now. She worked at the Treasury before that. So she is a modern monetary theorist whose wet dream would be to have all the banks blow up and issue a currency directly from the central bank. And what better way to do that? Because most of the people watching this would say, I'm not ever taking that damn thing, a privacy eroded. I'm not taking it as long as but what if everything goes poof, just like that? Because everyone in the world dumps dollars. Well, then you're going to you're going to be glad to take, because she'll say, look, all you got to do is take the CBDC. We'll make your bank account whole and your investment account whole, because that's what modern monetary theory is. So this may be a wild theory that I've been talking about for 4 years, but we are coming closer and closer and closer and closer to it becoming reality. And at what point does it just become too stupid to be stupid? Because instead of clinging to the privilege of being the world reserve currency, it seems that for the last 4 years, this administration has done more to harm this country in terms of its status internationally and here at home than any external foe could have ever have done. So yeah, I do think that CBDCs are coming, and I do think it will be at the hand of some event that really shakes people up for good measure.
Jeez, it's hard not to get depressed when you hear about this.
No,
but
man, and I hate being that way because
No, I know.
I'm that kind of person. I hate it. But at some point, I'd rather know what's coming so I can get out of the way of it instead of being run over by it.
So you have all these powerful players and nations buying up commodities. Yet, outside of gold, recently, commodities have largely been kind of flat. They've had little runs and retreats, and you look at copper and oil. I mean, same sort of thing, up, back. No significant lasting rise. What's going on there if there's such a massive buildup of demand for commodities? Are they all being suppressed? Like, what's happening here?
Many of them are. The precious metals are. This is a presentation that I gave here. The green line represents the top 8 commercial banks. The red is the top 4, the big ones. So here you have silver. It's the largest concentrated short position ever. 8 commercial banks. Platinum, gold, palladium. You get oil way down here and copper over here. So they're not being shorted as much, but these ones certainly are. And to the point where, and that's all I really wanted to show you on. And by the way, here is the subcommittee S.2768 that I was talking about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then here are the supply demand numbers, by the way: industrial, electrical, electronics, photovoltaics, brazing, alloy, solders, other industrial, photography, jewelry, silverware. Nothing in there in military. And then the last piece of the puzzle, this is the LBMA silver stockpile. Going back, you can see how low it is. There are other commodities that are being messed with as well, not to that degree, but maybe that's why China bought the LME, the London Metals Exchange. They now own this exchange and are stockpiling, warehousing the metals being traded in it within China, within China's own borders. So I think this is a deal where the countries that are doing it understand the significance of slow accumulation. They're not doing it too fast to cut off their nose to spite their face, but what they're doing instead is going around all the world and stockpiling relationships with all of these underdeveloped countries who have all of these resources in the ground and haven't been able to pull them out yet. So if you just went to the exchanges and drained them, it's too alarming. If you look at, for example, the Belt Road Initiative, it's 150 plus countries right now, 75% of human population. These are all underdeveloped countries that are all resource rich. They all have contracts with China to strike deals, to pull these commodities out of the ground, to build roads and bridges and maritime channels, to build oil refineries, to build gold and silver and copper mines, and all of these things. They're thinking, this is part of the problem. We think in terms of hours, they think in terms of years. And so we're thinking, well, why aren't they, doing this right now of what's available? Because that's too alarming. Instead, they're playing the long game, and they say, well, we'll just go and get all of the future supply. And that's a whole hell of a lot smarter and a whole hell of a lot less easy it becomes harder to discern exactly what they're doing by doing that, rather than just by draining the exchanges of copper and of zinc and lead. But in essence, by buying up all the mints and the mines and the refineries and then striking up all of these deals, they are doing it. It's just more pervasive in precious metals because of the Western interference.
Staying on the topic of U.S. monetary policy, the Saudis obviously opted not to renew the petrodollar agreement. This has been hailed by some as a historic geopolitical event, and yet others are like, it's a nothing burger, it's no big deal, whatever. To me, it seems like pretty big deal. It was an agreement that lasted 50 years and, essentially meant that in exchange for the military support from the U.S., the Saudis would exclusively price their oil in USD, creating liquidity for that currency, making it the world's reserve currency, or certainly helping it. And the agreement also said that the Saudis would invest their excess revenues of oil into treasuries.
Correct.
So that sounds to me like a pretty damn big deal.
It's huge. And the people who say nothing burger are missing the point altogether. It's more than just joining, this union and doing these things. They've joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They've joined the BRICS New Development Bank. They have been invited to join the BRICS, and they will join the BRICS. They have been playing both sides with the U.S. for a little bit. I'll give you an example. There was a G7 meeting just a month ago that coincided, or there was the G7 meeting in Italy that coincided with the BRICS meeting in Russia, in Novograd, Russia. And the G7 invited the Royal Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to the meeting. He said, "I'm busy, guys. Thanks anyway." But he sent his delegates to the meeting in Novograd. And this is where we had Dilma Rousseff come out and say, not only have 59 more countries officially apply to BRICS, but that we've agreed in principle to the new settlement currency called the unit. It will be traded over Project M-Bridge. Project M-Bridge is a cross-border payment system that was developed by China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates, kind of overseen by the BIS. And it is a platform that allows trading of CBDCs, country CBDCs, across a platform that sidesteps SWIFT, no Western intermediary bank interference. Well, Saudi Arabia just became a full participant in this. Now, you take a step back and say, okay, there's 4 countries and Saudi Arabia. There's about 30 countries that are in observation mode with M-Bridge. Saudi Arabia is now one of the 5 main players in it. It is not compatible to U.S. dollars. The head of the BRICS New Development Bank, who was the former president of Brazil, not a little nitwit, says we've agreed in principle after having meetings with Sergei Glaziev, who is the reason I've been saying that this would happen for 4 years, because he's said for 4 years, he's the economic advisor for the Eurasian Economic Union, and he said, yeah, we're going to have a basket of currency, a basket of local currencies and a basket of commodities. Well, she came out and said, no, it's just going to be gold and currencies. So no basket of commodities, just gold, which is what the only other tier 1 reserve asset, as according to who? The BIS, who's part of this new program. Saudi Arabia is the only other country in it, other than the 4 that designed it, as a full participant. The dollar's not compatible. We're going to issue this, she said. So think of it that way. The largest producer of oil in the world is now a full participant in M-Bridge, and they said it will be a new settlement currency pegged to gold, which is the only other tier 1 reserve asset in the world. So it's massive. It's huge. And at the same time, they don't send their delegates to the G7 meeting. It's kind of like, yeah, F you, without really doing it. It's just, I'm not interested. Thank you. Anyway, it's like being asked out by 2 girls. No, I'm busy. Yeah, let's go. So it's not a nothing burger, but what it is, these are like, it's like, you look at a lot of the countries that are like India. India is making all sorts of progress and overtures in becoming deeper and deeper and deeper in with the BRICS countries and pushing back against the West, yet they haven't spit in the West's face yet. And so, look at Turkey as an example. Turkey is a member of NATO, and yet they're the first NATO country to officially apply to the BRICS after being turned down by the European Union. So these countries realize that this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal, and you better play right, because, the U.S. is still pretty damn tough, and you don't want to make the wrong move. And so they are finding safety in numbers, but they are doing things very judiciously. And they are doing it very slowly and methodically. And that's one of the things I respect about the way that these BRICS countries are operating. Saudi Arabia, if you look at it, they are still somewhat concerned about the relationship with the West, but they've given up on it, I think, in terms of where they are ultimately going by joining the BRICS, or in essence, all but fully signing on, joining the Belt Road Initiative along with every other OPEC country, joining the New Development Bank, joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the largest regional financial and military group in the world, and then making these statements that will take other currencies for oil, not just the exclusivity of the dollar, and then becoming a full participant in M-Bridge, which is going to be the new settlement currency for the BRICS, which are all the oil-producing countries. The handwriting is on the wall. And so when you get to the end of any long macro trend, the recency and normalcy bias is as thick as it can be. And a lot of people either see it or say, nah, it's a nothing burger. Well, you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And some of these very smart people who are very well read, they just read the wrong stuff. They're going to get run over by this. And if you take a step back and look at the crumbs that are laid at our feet, you can see that this is something to not underestimate in any capacity. Because as it is, the BRICS have a larger swath of human population, global GDP, military might with 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals on the planet. They have a larger swath of commodity production. China refines 100% of the rare earths. 100%.
Yeah.
They produce, along with the Eurasian continent, about 85%. Refine 100%. Have we really thought out this green initiative? And so you talk about these things. This is the little by little by little. This is the end of an empire, if you will, or the changing of a guard. And it's not something that will happen easily. And there'll be a lot of people saying that's impossible, could never happen. But it is happening. And to what degree, I guess we will see. Look, American spirit is such that we've had our backs against the wall many times and have come out perfectly. But we were united. And this country has lost its damn way. And that's part of why I say, is it too stupid to be stupid? You know, the reason I want Trump in office is because we're not united. We're at each other's throats. You're defined by who you voted for in the last election. There's divisiveness. There's lawlessness. You're no longer valued by your merit, but by your lifestyle instead. And
yeah,
you know,
well
all of
said.
the things that made this country great are just throw them out the window. And that's not lost on the rest of the world either. There's a theory out there you and your viewers should read. It'll take you 5 minutes, called Cloward Piven. And the Cloward Piven theory was a class ironically taught in the 60s at Columbia University, where Jared Bernstein and Obama went, along with Bill Barr, Madeleine Albright, Eric Holder, the current chief of staff, what's his name, the guy that flies all around the world.
Blinken.
They all went to Columbia, where they taught a class on how to topple the American empire by mass immigration, largely in the inner cities, creating a loyal serfdom of voters that would never vote Republican ever again, by overwhelming the entitlement system, and all of these things that they taught as a class on how to, largely through like universal basic income, turn this country into a socialist country. It's happening. You read the tenets of Cloward Piven, Clowardpiven. It's a husband and wife professor who taught this class at Columbia. You read the tenets of it, you'll say, my God, they are doing it. Put that together with our lead economic advisor wanting to lose the reserve currency status, weaponizing the dollar against all of the countries in the BRICS, including Russia and Iran, and threatening to impose sanctions on China and all of these other African countries, which we are sanctioning. And then you sign an executive order to go green. You say, my God, are we trying to bring down the system to reset it? I don't know. But I have a hard time thinking, at least, that it's not plausible when you read about it and you just put all the dots together. You're like, man, if this isn't what they're trying to do, they're sure doing a good job of screwing the pooch, if you will.
I have a great admiration for America, and particularly American history. Bit of a buff when it comes to the Civil War period. And I've lived in the U.S. for a couple of years. I'm a Canadian, of course, but I have a lot of respect for the country. Now, it's a country that has a history of being messy, violent. It's not the first time the country's been divisive. Now, I'm probably demonstrating recency bias here, but I just have a hard time. I would never, ever want to bet against America. I believe in it. I believe in what it stands for. I know it's messy. I know there's opposing forces within America. But man, it has been such a beautiful example of capitalism and the free markets. Yes, maybe not recently, but it's still amongst the best this world has in that regard. And I'm hoping.
It is, and we're clinging to it, but you can see how that's starting to trend. Look, like I said at the onset of this conversation, I come from nothing. I mean, Miles is my dad's middle name. Franklin is his friend who gave us $60,000 to start a company in a one-room office the size of a closet in 1989.
Amazing.
This country has given me more than I could ever dream for. I am a patriot. I am the American dream. 100% the embodiment of it. From nothing to 10 billion in sales without a customer complaint, because this country gave me the ability to do that. And I thank God every day I was born here. But I do not like what I see. And you can ignore it. People can ignore it. And dismiss it, or they can say, my God, this is really happening. The question that the part that I have the hardest time with is that how divided the country is. And that is the chapter 1 of the Communist Manifesto, divide and conquer. We are divided. And that's, this country has always done best when we united together on one front. And hopefully we're able to do that again. And, I don't even think Trump can fix our economic woes. He's talking about devaluing the dollar and sanctioning other countries and suppressing interest rates again. That's the same problem we've always done. But what he can do is restore some credibility to the pillars of this society that have been so beaten down, including the judicial system, the borders. My wife and her family emigrated the right way. Spent 2 years in Italy waiting to get into the United States. When they finally did, they thank God every day for it. And it becomes, a guy lives across the street from me. There was a party last year because he finally became a citizen. He's from Montreal. Finally became a citizen here in the United States. It took years. And we had a party for him. I don't want there to be any confusion. I am a patriot.
Oh, I know you are. I know you are.
Everything that it's afforded me, I thank God for. I do. And that's why I'm so adamant about what's happening. It's like, come on, man. I mean, how do you not see what they're doing to our wonderful country? All little boys and girls grew up just like you did in Canada, wanting to come to this country, wear Levi's jeans, listen to rock and roll, and have the opportunities that the United States afforded you. Absolutely. And everyone else from other countries who dreamed of coming here. Now, a lot of them are saying, well, it's better off where I'm at. I'm not going anywhere. Now, is it still the best country in the world? Yeah. But could it go down a very slippery slope? I would say the last 4 years, we have done more to damage our reputation, or this administration has, than any external foe ever could have. And that's why I'm so adamant about what's happening, because you put it together with the mismanagement of the dollar, we're creating $100,000 of debt every second, 24/7, every single second. And we're bankrupting this country and also morally.
And that's a big one too. And not to beat the drum too hard, but Canada I used to be very happy with Canadian politics because it was utterly boring. The people we would elect were boring, bean counters or some lawyers, and they would largely do pretty middle of the road stuff, and not much would change in 3-4 years. But in America, and it's obviously changed now. We're following the same path as America, but in America, politics has become religion. And you said something about values. That should be the primary driver behind where the country heads. But instead, it's politics. I mean, you go onto Twitter and it's like, it's a visceral war. If you say you're a Republican, it's ridiculous. So I think politics becoming a religion, I mean, whatever. Trump, I got no issues with Trump. I'd vote for Trump over Harris. I like his economics. But to me, Trump's just another man. People, and Harris, the same thing. People put these political leaders on these pedestals. It makes them like godlike figures. And I think that is a huge problem in a lot of Western countries.
You said something interesting, too. You said it's happening here. It's happened there. How about France? How about the UK?
Yeah.
How about all of the G7? It's like they're trying to bring the West down. The Western world, which has led the world in freedom and democracy and capitalism, they're all suffering the exact same fate. I will tell you that it's a little eerie that they all have the same problems and they all have the same issues. And look what's happening in the UK. They'll throw you in jail for a Twitter comment. It's the same pattern over and over and over again. So we need to break free from it, or we're going to end up a socialist country, not a capitalistic one. I hope I'm wrong. I truly do. But the scary thing is a lot of the stuff I've said publicly for 4 years is happening, and it freaks me out to no end. I got 3 kids. My youngest is 17. I don't wish for any of this. Yeah. But, I wish more people had either the stupidity or the courage to say stuff like I do, because, it's like I say the same stuff over and over again, but I keep seeing it, and it's becoming more and more concerning. And I think this year is like a roll of toilet paper. And the cardboard that's spinning faster and faster and faster, well, that's the election in November. Not to mention the big BRICS meeting next month. And so what's going to happen before we get to the end of the toilet paper roll? It's spinning faster, though, that is for damn sure. I don't know. The only problem is no matter who wins the election, half the country's pissed off. So
that is a concern. One thing, wrapping it up, one thing I always enjoy about your commentary is you always provide actionable insights and some food for thought for investors. And, we've gone through the geopolitics, what's going on in the precious metals market. And I think actually what you said at the beginning of the conversation about your dad, the sage advice he gave you, every 2 weeks, put something away for some gold or silver or in the precious metal sphere. Actually, I'm going to be telling my boys that when they're old enough, but I think that's sage advice. What our audience is typically in the range of 30 to 50 years old. Given everything that's going on in the world, the uncertainty, the volatility, and the debt accumulation, and East versus West starting to form, what is an actionable insight that you could give our audience from an investment perspective? Because they're mostly self-directed.
Pay yourself first. It's the best advice my father, the best gift he ever gave me. My dad never gave me anything but an opportunity and great advice. And that advice was to pay yourself first. You will never get out of the rat race if you don't. The power of compounding doesn't need to be compounding of interest. Compounding of time works the same way. It's like anything. You don't go to the gym 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, and expect to be buff. You got to do it every day over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until finally the results bear fruit. Well, the same thing is true about saving. And if you could have a conversation, if instead in these two windows it wasn't just me and you, it was you and you, but you in the future, yourself 30 years from now, you're going to say, dude, come on, man. You got to put some money away for us because we got things to do in 30 years. And you got kids and grandkids and weddings and you want to travel with your wife and you want to do some stuff. So put some money away and start paying yourself first, because we can very easily wake up. I still feel like I'm 19, I'm 54. Where the hell did all the time go? I have no idea, to be honest with you. I don't. And it happens so fast, it's crazy. But it is the greatest gift my father ever gave me. And to train yourself to prioritize your future self first. And I don't care if it's $10 every 2 weeks. I don't care if it's an ounce of silver, something. Pay yourself. If you don't, it's just like anything. I'll start my diet next week. I'll start working out next week. Next week comes, I'm busy tomorrow. I'll start New Year's. So New Year's comes in by the time, 2 years has gone by. And so, I would just simply say the best advice I could give anyone is to prioritize your future self. Pay yourself first, but be regimented on it. Every single 2 weeks, every time you get paid, set aside something and you won't even miss it. In my world, it's been gold and silver. It doesn't have to be, but it lends itself to be a good place to store it, because it's not a traditional asset that you can click a mouse button or use a credit card to spend it. It takes a modicum of effort to sell it. And there are very few things that you can leave for your kids or your family that has both intrinsic and sentimental value. My dad Aaron, he put away 5 ounces of silver for me every 2 weeks until I was old enough to do it myself. And look at this, I have 5,000 ounces of silver and I don't worry about the future. I could get married, I can buy a house, I can buy a car, because I started saving before everyone else understood the concept of savings. And the compounding of time is a big deal.
Perfect breakdown, man. Before we go, where can our viewers find you online, and where can they go to find more info on Miles Franklin Precious Metal Investments?
So we have a website, which a new one is coming out within just a few short days, but a few short weeks, maybe, I suppose. But I've had a bad habit of saying that, and then it takes longer. But it's always done.
Always does.
But it's almost done. But we, for a reason, keep our price list close to the vest, and the prices on our website are there for small orders. But we have a really competitive price list that people can request. And all they need to do is send us an email at info@Miles Franklin. Let us know that they came from this show. Put it in the subject line. No obligation. If you just want the price list, put it in there. If you'd like to be contacted or have questions about anything you've heard on this show, or things like precious metals IRAs or anything related, just put your phone number down. We will contact you. Again, no obligation. You just want the price list, we'll send it to you. And it will be as competitive as just about any company in North America. We also have a fantastic storage program. We have exclusives from BRICS that I think no one can compete with. So whether it be in Canada, Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, or in the United States, in Los Angeles, Dallas, Salt Lake City, Miami, In New York, we have wonderful, wonderful programs with exclusives from BRICS that can't be matched. And then I'm starting my own podcast. I used to do one a few years ago. I stopped for 3-4 years and been on everyone's show like yours. I'm actually going to launch one tomorrow. Will be my first.
Perfect.
And we'll see where that goes. I have no idea where it's going to go. I guess we'll see. But if you Google my name, I'm everywhere out there.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed this conversation with you. I'd love to come back and pick up where we left off. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about between now and then. And I do appreciate very much you having me back on.
Hey, likewise, Andy. I feel like I've been chatting with an old buddy, man. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for coming on the pod.
You got it, brother. Look forward to picking up where we left off. Hope you and everyone else out there stays well. And, as the Chinese curse says, may you live in interesting times. These ain't dull.
No doubt. Thanks a lot, Andy.
See you, brother.